Hello guys, how are you?
I'm Hardeep Singh. Welcome back to your own YouTube channel. IELTS updates and recent exams. For more updates related to recent IELTS exam writing test topics, listening, reading, practice test, and speaking, you got guesswork. Please, guys, participate in everyday listening and reading practice test to achieve your desired band score in your actual IELTS exam. Please hit the like and subscribe button. Press the bell icon for the upcoming notifications. Don't forget like, subscribe and share my YouTube channel and my Facebook page, IELTS updates and recent exams.
Part 1.
You will hear a woman calling an animal park to inquire about a job. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5.
Bender's Animal Park, hello.
Oh, hello. I'm ringing to ask whether you have any jobs available.
What sort of work are you looking for? Is that permanent or part-time or...
Actually, I'm just looking for temporary work. I'm a student.
Oh, right. I'll just get a form and ask you a few questions. Then I'll pass your application on to our recruitment section. Is that okay?
Fine, thank you.
So, starting with your name.
It's Jane Lamerton.
Is that Lamerton?
There's only one M in it.
Oh, right. And your address?
It's 42 West Lane.
Right. And is that in Exeter?
Yes.
Okay. And can you give me your mobile phone number?
07792 430 921.
Right. Now, the next thing is, when are you available to start work?
I finish college on the 8th of June. That's in 3 weeks' time. But I can't start work till the 11th because I've got a hospital appointment on the 10th of June.
No problem. Now, I need to ask you a few questions about the type of job that might be suitable. Do you have any particular kind of work in mind? It doesn't necessarily mean that you will get work in the field that you want, but I can record your preferences.
Well, I'd do anything. And I have worked as an assistant animal keeper before, when I was still at school. But I'm studying at a catering college now, and I'd really like to get some experience as an assistant cook if possible.
Right. So that's your first choice. Have you done that kind of job before?
No, but I've helped my aunt sometimes. She runs a cafe in Exeter.
Would you say you've got any relevant skills then?
Well, I'm used to using the kind of equipment you usually find in a kitchen.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10.
Okay. And I know you're still studying, but do you already have any qualifications related to that kind of work? A hygiene qualification, for example?
I haven't, no, but I've got a certificate in food handling. I did it before I decided to become a full-time student.
Fine. Okay. That means you wouldn't need any specific training if you did get the kind of work you wanted. But you'd have to do a short course on first aid. All our new employees do that. It just takes half a day, and most people find it generally useful.
Oh, yes, I'm sure it is.
Well, That's about it, really. Oh, just one last thing. Can you give me the name of someone who would give you a reference, like a previous employer or...
Oh, yes. You can put Dr. Ruth Price.
Okay. Is that one of your college lecturers?
She's my college tutor. She's known me for over 2 years, and I'm sure she wouldn't mind. In fact, she's given me a reference before.
Fine. We'd probably contact her by phone. Do you happen to know her number?
I've got it on my phone, yes. It's 0208 685 114. That's a landline.
Good. Well, as I say, I can't promise anything, but I'll pass your application on, and you should hear in a few days. Is there anything else?
Just one thing. I suffer from a particular type of colour blindness, and sometimes employers have to make special arrangements for that.
Okay, I'll make a note of that. It won't be good that you've made us aware of it. You can provide us with more details if you're offered a job.
Okay. Thanks very much. Bye.
Bye.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 2.
You hear a club leader giving information to a group of young people who are planning to do a 2-week holiday course at the Tamerton Centre. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen and answer questions 11 to 15.
Hello, everyone. I've been asked to talk to you this afternoon about next month's trip to Tamerton Study Center for the 2-week course. Now, some of the things I'm going to say you may have already heard or read about, but I think it's important to emphasize a few key points. First of all, it's worth reminding you why Tamerton was set up in the first place, in the late 1960s. That was really before all the concern with preserving the environment, which everyone talks about these days. The idea was simply to get people out of the cities and into the country, and to find out that just being outdoors can be very rewarding. This is not going to be a holiday in the usual sense. It's called an adventure course because you'll really be stretched to your limits, but that in itself can be a positive thing. The group I took last year, for example, said that although they actually felt pretty weak and exhausted all the time, it really made them learn a lot about themselves and increased their confidence. And in the end, that's the most important thing. Now, all of you knew about policies at Tamerton before you signed up for it, so you know that in many ways it's quite old-fashioned. You don't have a lot of choice in what you do. But something which I think makes the place so special is that you get to try so many different things every day. For instance, one day you'll do climbing, and the next you'll be surveying rock pools. It's not intended that you become an expert in any of them. It's more like a taster, which you can follow up if you want. And there isn't a lot of free time. Organized activities and talks, etc., go on until 9 p.m., and lights go out at 11 p.m. There are table tennis tables with all the equipment and board games, though I have to say the pieces often go missing, so it's a good idea to take your own. There's a DVD player with a good selection of films suitable for this age group, so don't take yours. Bedtime at 11 p.m. is strictly enforced, and there's a good reason for this. You're all under 18, and we organizers need to know that all group members are accounted for in the house as we close for the night. And of course, you'll be so exhausted anyway that you'll be too sleepy to want to cause any trouble.
Now you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
Now, what should you pack? The information sheet tells you a lot about what clothing to bring. But what about other things? Well, Tamerton House has its own small shop, but anything there is several miles away, so you won't have many opportunities for buying supplies. So in this last part of my talk, I'm going to explain what objects you should take with you to the center, what you can take if you want, and also, very importantly, what you cannot take. Several of you came up to me before this talk and asked whether you can take things like kettles or hair dryers. The answer is there are plenty of these electrical appliances available in the center, and they are of the proper voltage and are checked regularly. Yours may not be, so the rules at Tamerton say you can't bring them into the center because it's considered a fire risk. Remember, it's a very old house. Now, another question was about cell phones. Although you definitely can't have them on during inside talks, you equally definitely need them when you're out on exercises. So they're a must, I'm afraid. Anybody who wishes to talk to me about borrowing a phone for the fortnight, please see me after this talk. Now, the weather's heating up at the moment, and you'll be outdoors a great deal. If you wear proper clothing, especially a hat, sun cream is optional. Also, they sell high-factor cream in the shop, so you don't have to take any of your own unless there's a special kind you use. Now, there's a special note about things like deodorants, which come in aerosol cans. I need to tell you that these are banned in the center because apparently they have the habit of setting off the fire alarms. If you want to take an aerosol can, you'll actually be at risk of being told to leave. And finally, people have been asking about whether they need to take towels. Well, the center does provide 1 towel per guest, which you're required to wash yourself. If you're happy with that, then don't bring another. If not, take one of your own. Just remember how much outdoor exercise you'll be doing and how dirty and wet you'll be getting.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3.
You will hear a student and her teacher discussing the student's essay. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 25.
Hi there, Dr. Masters. Do you have some time to speak to me about my essay?
Hi, Kate. Yes, I've got time right now. Sit down.
Thank you.
Now, how can I help you?
To start with, I'd like to ask you about sources.
Of course.
Well, as you know, I'm writing about environmental conservation. I was in the library and I found that book you recommended on deforestation in South America. It's called The Diminishing Forest.
Good. Was it helpful?
Very. I was worried, though, that some of the statistics it had were a little out of date, as it was published 15 years ago.
Yes, I can see that might be a problem. What you can do is to check out the book's website. The authors have up-to-date statistics there that you can use. The website is also a mine of information on the types of pesticides and insecticides used in different areas of the continent.
Thanks, that's helpful. Now, I also looked up the Journal of Environmental Management, as you suggested. The trouble there was that there is an issue every month, and they don't often discuss South America. I've gone through some editions, but it hasn't been very useful so far.
I see. Well, I know that publication very well. Last year, in the months of May, June, and July, there were some excellent articles on forestry plantation initiatives in South American countries. Look at those editions and I'm sure you'll find something of use.
Okay, thanks. Finally, the reason a lot of deforestation takes place in South America seems to be concerned with creating more farmland. I wanted to explore this in South American countries, but as that's not my subject, I didn't know where to start.
There's a good book called The Green Pastures. This gives a good review of this subject in various South American countries over the last 20 years. It also documents the rise of cattle farming in Argentina and Brazil, as those are the two big players in that industry.
I read that those countries supply the fast food industry with their meat.
Yes, they can produce it at a much reduced price per kilogram compared to the US, and so that industry has really thrived recently.
Okay, well, that really helps me with my sources, Dr. Masters.
You now have some time to look at questions 26 to 30. Now listen to the rest of the discussion and answer questions 26 to 30.
Is there anything else, Kate?
Yes, I wanted to know if you knew anything about government enforcement of environmental law.
A little. Many of the nation's environmental statutes contain both civil and criminal provisions to address environmental law violations. I did a paper on that in the context of the United States recently.
What kind of things can the U.S. government do?
It firstly depends on what kind of prosecution is taken, civil or criminal.
What's the difference?
Civil action can take two forms. Civil administrative actions are non-judicial enforcement actions usually taken by a state under its own authority, and they do not involve a judicial court process. These actions can be a notice of violation or an order directing an individual, a business, or other entity to take action to come into compliance, or to clean up a site. The order can be with or without penalties.
What's the other form of civil action?
They are civil judicial actions. They are formal lawsuits that are filed in court against persons or entities that have failed to comply with statutory or regulatory requirements, failed to comply with an administrative order, failed to pay the costs for cleaning up a polluted site, or failed to commit to doing the cleanup work. These cases are not filed by the relevant state, but by the U.S. Department of Justice, which does it for them.
And what about criminal actions in the U.S.?
They are much rarer. Criminal actions are usually reserved for the worst violations, and those that are willful or knowingly committed. A court conviction can result in fines or imprisonment.
What are the civil penalties like?
They are determined by the severity of the crime. Civil penalties are monetary assessments imposed on a person or regulated entity due to a violation or non-compliance. Penalties represent an incentive for coming into compliance and staying in compliance with the environmental statutes and regulations. Penalties are also designed to recoup the economic benefit of noncompliance and to compensate for the seriousness of the violation.
That's great, Dr. Masters. That helps a lot.
You're welcome. I know that wasn't much to do with South America.
That's okay. A lot of the countries there have based their judicial systems regarding the environment on the U.S. model.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
You will hear part of a lecture on plastic pollution in the ocean. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Good morning, everyone. Today we'll be discussing plastics pollution and, more specifically, microplastics. In recent years, plastic pollution in the ocean has become a significant environmental concern for governments, scientists, non-governmental organisations and members of the public worldwide. A recent study derived from 6 years of research by the 5 Gyres Institute estimated that 5.25 trillion plastic particles weighing some 269,000 tonnes are now floating on the surface of the sea. World plastics production has experienced almost constant growth for more than half a century, rising from approximately 1.9 million tonnes in 1950 to approximately 330 million tonnes in 2013. Today, the World Bank estimates that 1.4 billion tonnes of trash are generated globally each year, 10% of it plastic. The International Maritime Organization has banned the dumping of plastic waste at sea. However, an unknown portion of the plastic produced each year escapes into the environment instead of being landfilled, incinerated or recycled. Some of it eventually makes its way to sea. At the same time, plastics in consumer products have become subject to increasing scrutiny regarding their potential effects on human health. Various components of polycarbonate plastics and endocrine disruptors are examples of the most widely known polluting chemicals. However, these are only 2 of the many monomers, plasticizers, flame retardants, antimicrobials and other chemicals used in plastics manufacturing that are able to migrate into the environment. Today, there is a lot of funding from private and public sources that has permitted research on human exposures to plastics in water and the potential health risks. Studies have already demonstrated plastics' tendency to absorb persistent, bioaccumulative and toxic substances, which are present in trace quantities in almost all water bodies. The constituents of plastics, as well as the chemicals and metals they absorb, can travel into the bodies of marine organisms upon consumption, where they may concentrate and climb the food chain, ultimately into humans. The path from plastic pollution to chemical exposure through seafood is a long one, figuratively and often literally, and researchers say that tracing all the individual steps in that theoretical journey is not the same as identifying human health effects. Actual contacts with chemicals are determined by innumerable variables and still need to be quantified. Then these levels must be evaluated within broader contexts of consumer plastic use and environmental pollutant levels. Plastics that reach the ocean will gradually break down into ever smaller pieces due to sunlight exposure, oxidation, and the physical action of waves, currents, and grazing by fish and birds. So-called microplastics, variably defined in the scientific literature and popular press as smaller than 5 millimeters in diameter, are understood to be the most abundant type of plastic in the ocean. Researchers have found microplastics in varying concentrations almost everywhere, from near-shore environments to the open ocean, and they have estimated that particles 4.75 millimeters or smaller, about the size of a lentil, make up roughly 90% of the total plastic pieces they collected. Collecting, counting and typing plastics are the first steps in understanding the extent of plastic pollution in specific areas, and large organisations have asked the public for their assistance. This will save millions of research dollars. The public has been asked to sample seawater for floating microplastics near where they live and log the results on a website. In order to conduct the research, they've invented a low-cost, do-it-yourself collection apparatus called a baby legs. The device starts with a plastic bottle top surrounded by corks from bottles to keep it floating. The open end of the bottle can be dragged along the surface of the sea. Water and any microplastics go in through the opening. Behind the water bottle top, a pair of baby's tights is attached. The seawater will flow through the material, but any microplastics will be stopped. Of course, it's not only the sea that can be sampled. A baby legs can be used equally effectively to capture small plastics that tend to float on the surface of oceans, lakes and rivers. The tights should be of a very bright colour to help recognise the contamination in the samples.
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
So guys, don't forget like, subscribe and share my YouTube channel and my Facebook page, IELTS updates and recent exams. For more updates related to recent IELTS exam writing test topics, listening, reading, practice test and speaking, you got guesswork. Please guys, participate in everyday new IELTS listening and reading practice tests to achieve your desired band score in your actual IELTS exam. For more IELTS material, visit my official website www.ieltsupdatesandrecentexams.com. The link is given below in the description. If you need PDF files of latest IELTS material, then please join my Telegram channel. So guys, please write your score below the comment section. Again, thanks for listening. God bless you all guys. Stay tuned, stay safe.